So, Tolly, what bubble are we popping today?
I don't know, Carla. Let's find out.
Happy Sunday, everybody. I'm Tolly.
I'm Carla, and this is another episode of
Popping the Bubble. How you doing today, Carla?
I'm doing so well, Tolly. How are you doing?
I am so excited. We have such a good episode today. It's going to be so good.
Yeah, so today we have something really special planned. Since this is the last episode of our Black Lives Matter series, we have not one, but two guests that will be joining us for this episode.
Two guests. Although this is the end of the series for the movement is not over. The conversations need to keep happening. The petitions, the signatures, you just need to keep fighting. So we wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, like Tolly said, we know that 3 episodes are not enough time to talk about all of this, and we'll probably be revisiting these topics frequently in the future, but we did want to take the time to talk about other things that are also really important to us.
Today's show is going to be broken down into 2 sections. In the first half, we have our first guest, and she will be talking about what it feels like going to PWI during the summer and fall. In the second half, we will talk to our other guests about Black Lives Matter on a more global scale, especially with everything that's going on in Africa and more deeply in Nigeria.
So for those of you who don't know what a PWI is, it's a predominantly white institution. Tolly and I both happen to go with one along with our first guest. So our first guest is someone who we have known for just over a year, but it feels like we've known her for a lot longer. She's a student leader here at SG and someone who both Tolly and I look up to as a role model. She is intelligent, kind, and compassionate. It is an honor to have her as our first guest on our podcast. Everybody, our first guest is Zuriel Jiménez.
Woo!
Hey Z, how you doing?
Hi, I'm all right. How are you?
We're good. We're so excited to have you. It's such an honor.
It's a privilege to be here.
Tell us about yourself, Z. Where you from? Some fun facts. Let us know. Let the people know.
I was born in Harlem, New York, and I lived there for 3 years, and then I moved to Pennsylvania, but I'm always back and forth, and I'm a 4th former at SG. I reclassed my 9th grade year, too, so this is my 2nd year.
Yeah, Z is older than both me and Tolly, but we don't talk about it.
We don't talk about it. Everybody's older than me, so it's okay.
Yeah.
So let's get started. Do you want to tell us and the people about your experiences in PWIs, what that was like, what you did, and, how you're taking away from being in a PWI?
So it's really interesting because I went to a predominantly Black and Hispanic public school before I attended a PWI. So the change was drastic because I feel like I put myself under a magnifying glass in which I had to draw out every aspect of my identity because it was always on display no matter where I was. Being in classrooms where I was now the minority really changed my perspective on who I was and who I was surrounded with, and always made me on the defensive side. So I became more of my skin, more aware of my skin, my identity, and more aware of how I needed to protect it against people who might see differently than I do.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. I mean, I've been going for most of my life to a school filled with students of color and Black people, so definitely being here my first year at St. George's, it was a complete different experience, and literally felt I was like on a white canvas, just this little black dot on a white canvas. I definitely feel that. So for our listeners, at our school right now, we have a program dedicated to having discussions and learning about different issues and topics that are prevalent to the student experience in life, both inside and outside of our community. This year, Zuriel and one of her classmates, Alex Gaines, have both taken initiative and along with many faculty members have driven the program this year.
I remember one day during the summer, I got a text from you, Z, saying that you wanted to do something about our school's response to what happened over the summer with the racial awakening that was happening nationally, and how we as a community should move forward from it, and what we should gain from the process. And then I think within the next few hours, you had sent me a whole document with, it was at least a couple pages long, with research and ideas for the school. And so I just want you to talk us through that process of, what sparked that in you and how you took the initiative to work with faculty members, and what's that been like for you?
I feel like people have a large misconception in which the racial awakening for students of color began once these events started happening this year. And they don't realize we've experienced things beyond this that have driven us to this point in which we need to do something because we have the ability to do something. So personally, I had my kind of awakening was when I attended my first PWI. And this is when I learned from my from upper class students that I had the privilege to attend a boarding school, of course. But I also have the privilege to make change in this boarding school, because since it is a PWI, these students have been exposed to the things I have been exposed to. And it's not my job to expose them to more things that can help them in real life situations, but it's my job to also assist with their awakening as well. So when it came to this point in the summer in which I had thought of maybe suggesting this to the school, it was because I didn't want to be in the same environment I was in the world. In the world, it was normalized for these racial injustices, homophobic things to happen, microaggressions were normalized. But I didn't want my community to normalize these things. So people of color should not be subject to that negative experience in order to gain this right education, in order to have the same advantages as other students in the school. So I feel like it's the community's job to take initiative and make that change, so we do not have to stand on a platform where we're seeing everything always from a different eye because of the things that are happening within our community. And that's why I was driven to make change, because I didn't want the same experience I experienced in the world to be the same experience I experienced at school.
Yeah, I kind of want to go back to what you said about the responsibility of us as the students of color. And I feel like a lot of the times students of color feel that pressure to be the ones to speak up in conversations when we're talking about race, and to have that weight of educating the rest of their classmates and their teachers. But at the end of the day, we're students too. Like, our job is to come here and to get an education. We have the same responsibilities to ourselves as our white counterparts and our white peers. And I feel like a lot of people forget that. But at the same time, I know the three of us here are all people who would love to take that on, to be the people who are helping to educate others, because we see the value in that. And that's not to crap on the people who choose not to, because it's their right to choose not to. Like, their job first is to be a student, and if they want to, they can take that extra step. But I feel this personal responsibility being here at a PWI. I feel like it's a role that I should take on as somebody who values that education. And so I'm glad that, you and Tolly both share that with me, and that we can kind of do that collectively. But I'm really inspired by your work with the school, and with SGSC and everything that's going on, because it's really taken off. And I think that it's been pretty effective. I don't know, maybe you can talk more about that. But
yeah, and it's so interesting. I never thought about it until you just said it a while ago, but you wanting to take that responsibility to make sure that your community where we go to school is not the community outside of the world. I know for the past few weeks I've had this idea and belief it's not our responsibility to teach, but I never thought about it as in a way it is our responsibility to make sure that we're getting the same education as our white peers and classmates. So for that, we need to be in a community where we feel safe and welcome. And I guess that I when you said it, I was like, wow, I never thought about it like that, and that's so interesting. And I think that's a new perspective I've just gotten from that. So thank you.
Yeah, because a part of taking on, personally, I take on stress, anxiety from schoolwork, constantly in the classroom grinding, because I feel like it is my duty as a student to show up to the standard that the school has created for me. But on top of that, I shouldn't have to deal with stuff outside the classroom that could be controlled by my peers or by my teachers, that could have been taught before. I shouldn't have to deal with that. And for others, I saw the same thing occurring, that on top of the stress and anxiety that comes with schoolwork, you have to deal with somebody acting up, with somebody going against you and trying to defend their ideas of ignorance against your identity. And I felt personally, if I can create that change for some other people in my community so we don't have to experience that often, then I feel that I should take that step. If I have the ability to do it, I will do it. Because it's not just me who I'm doing it for, it's the people around me who experience the same thing.
Yes, I love that you said that. Ugh. I think my whole ideology thus far has been not only doing it for myself and for my friends, but doing it for the kids who are going to come behind me, the future students of color who are going to go through exactly what I went through. Because I know when I first got here, it was a culture shock. It was a complete culture shock. Like the two of you, I had gone to a predominantly people of color school before, and I had always lived surrounded by people of different cultures and diversity. And so to come here, it was a culture shock. Like, there's no other way to put it. Like I didn't know what to do. And I think I was drawn to Tolly and the other students of color in our grade because it felt more comfortable. I know that there's this like, oh, all the black kids are friends, or like, oh, there's that whole like, it's nice to have that community, that people who you automatically feel safe with. And I think I just need to stress the importance of being there for each other and showing up for each other, because I don't want to say it, but at the end of the day, like, we are what each other have, because we can understand the experience of each other's. And that's not to say that our white peers can't be sympathetic, but they can't fully understand what exactly it is that we're going through. So it's good to have each other at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, when I first came here, I was like, huh. Like, I was prepared and taught, but you're only taught to an extent because everyone has their different experiences and their different ways of going through life. Like, I remember freshman year, I used to yell microaggressions at people whenever they would cause me microaggression. Like, that was my thing. I used to just be like, microaggression, and then it would just be that, but I would never explain why it was a microaggression or what a microaggression was. But I think something I've learned over like these past 3 years is like sometimes our white classmates and peers don't know, and it's not our job or our duty to educate, but it's nice if we do educate, because then we're we're helping them, and we're making it a better community and a better place, not only for us but for everyone else involved.
Yeah, I agree. And I think with that comes the importance of education, because people haven't necessarily been exposed to an environment where they're surrounded by as much diversity that there is here. And so they're ignorant, not because they want to be, but because they simply don't know. They haven't had that education before. And so that's why I think programs like what you helped start, SGSC here at SG, I feel like those are so important, because that's where the education comes from. That's where people learn the difference between ignorance and actively choosing to harm people. And so I commend you for that, Z. And so with that, I want to ask you, what advice do you have for people who are in that process of learning and engaging in these conversations, and maybe some advice that you would give to those who are scared to take actions and start something like you did at PWIs or any other school or workplace that they're at?
I will start from my personal experience. When going to a public school, they do not teach you these things of racial injustices or microaggressions. They do not teach you how to react, or they do not display that for you to understand, why is this wrong? Why does this feel wrong? Why did this teacher let these students say the N-word even though they're not Black? Like, why are these things going on? And you can't understand that unless you go to PWI. And part of going to PWI, my advice would be to the students who are entering, not just as a student of color, but as a white student, is that you will be challenged as an individual, not just for time management, as they say, not just for doing your own laundry. You will be challenged as an individual to learn what is ignorance, and what is arrogance. What are your beliefs? How do they go against somebody's morality, somebody's humanity? And how do they touch on politics? And how do they intersect so they allow one another to truly see that it's more morality over politics than anything? So it's the realization that yes, you can claim ignorance, but when you are taught these things and when you are engaging in these conversations, it is your job to hold yourself accountable for listening. Because when that does happen, that is no longer something you can claim as ignorance. That is their arrogance, because you had the opportunity to learn.
Yes, I've been saying this all week. The accountability part, I think it's so important. Like, I understand people not knowing, but the moment you know, you are held accountable. Like, your actions, your words, you are held accountable because someone has taught you. You have been taught. So you need to take what you've been taught and bring it into a position where you make everyone around you safe and feel welcome. And like, I agree. Definitely a difference between ignorance and arrogant.
Oh, I was going to say, I think it's okay in some situations to claim ignorance because in a place where there's so much new things that are occurring that you are unfamiliar with in a new environment, it is okay to not understand something and accept your past and accept that you are wrong. Because once I had been very closed minded about a bunch of things, but once entering into these institutions, it's okay to acknowledge that was ignorance. I did not know that, and I will now grow from it. But then being in a conversation where you have the ability to learn something new and you shut it out, you look at your phone, you turn away from the conversation, that is now arrogance.
When you are uncomfortable in a conversation, that means that the conversation is going well. And that is so essential to being educated, is finding yourselves in situations where you are uncomfortable. Because a lot of people, they do what you said. They turn to their phone, they look away, they stay silent because they're uncomfortable. They don't want to have to feel like they need to hold themselves accountable because it makes them feel bad. But that is all part of the learning and growing process. If you're not uncomfortable, if you're not reflecting on the things that you've done in the past and saying, okay, maybe what I did then was questionable, maybe what I said wasn't exactly the right way to go about it. And so I think that's an essential part of the process, but that's the part that people are most afraid of. And that's why sometimes these conversations don't get anywhere, because people aren't willing to do that self-reflection and to think about, okay, did I do that or did I do this? Am I at fault? And so I just think that's so important. Like, you need to feel uncomfortable and you need to have conversations with people who will hold you accountable. But, it's okay to admit that you've made mistakes in the past, as long as you're trying to move forward and move on with that.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much, Z, for being our guest. But before you go, any last words of wisdom for the listeners out there?
It's so easy to overlook the fact that your classmates, student of color classmates, are sitting in these classrooms each and every day uncomfortable with something somebody has said, tries to address it, but the teacher just pushes them to the side. They're uncomfortable every single day in these classrooms and dealing with this, and that's why they are growing in their that's why they're having their personal development. That's why their voice is starting to grow and starting to change with confidence. That's why you see them rising to the occasion, becoming student leaders. That's why you see them being able to grow. That's why you see such growth in individuality, because they're undergoing the uncomfortability of these situations. And that is part of privilege, being able to ignore the uncomfortability of situations. That's something you should acknowledge with your privilege, being able to turn away, because that's nothing that pertains to you. It has no interest for you. And seeing that has no interest for you, there's no connection towards you, that's a privilege to look away and say that has nothing to do with me, when it does. Because as being a part of a group of a group of oppressors, you may not be an oppressor, where you are part of the group that kind of protects it from breaking down what is causing the oppression and what is disenabling us from growing and overcoming it. So it is okay to be uncomfortable. You must claim responsibility for your actions. And yeah, you don't have to speak in every conversation, but listen attentively.
Yes, and I just want to say one last thing. If you're a student of color or a person of color out there somewhere and you're listening to this, if you feel pressured, if you feel like people are singling you out to talk and to be the one to start the conversations, and you just feel uncomfortable in that, don't do it.
You don't have to.
You literally don't have to. Put your own mental health and your well-being before anything else. And then if you're comfortable and if it's something that you genuinely want to do, then you can go the extra step and you can educate people, but it's never your responsibility to. Because that, like Z said, that is the responsibility of our white peers, to educate themselves, because we can't hold ourselves accountable for everything that they do.
Yeah,
you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. That's the thing.
That's true.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely this year, I've been talking, but I've also been listening. I'm like, I've talked already, so I'm gonna listen because, we don't always gotta talk, but everyone should always be listening, and yeah.
Oh my God, Z, thank you so much for being our first guest. We love you so much. We couldn't be more honored to have you here. Oh, you're so intelligent. You're so smart. And I hope that we can have you on here again someday in the future.
Yes, thank you. Before you leave, do you want to give yourself a shout out on social media so the people know where to find you?
Instagram, Zuriel Jiménez. No one can spell that. Yes. Thank you.
We'll leave your at.
We'll leave your at.
We got you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Z. We love you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Now we're going to start the second half of what we have planned for today. Tolly, do you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, so before we introduce the second guest, we wanted to take some time to talk about what's going on in Africa.
Let me just start with saying that Africa is an entire continent. There are many countries in Africa. Okay? I just want to make that very clear. Africa is a continent, not a country. So while many may be unaware that many countries in Africa are facing individual crises, while we will be doing an overview of some of these countries, we hope that you do your own research and educate yourselves on this matter, because as much as it is important to learn and educate yourselves about what's going on where you live, it's just as important to learn about what's going on outside of our country, because all Black lives matter, not just the ones here in America.
In Namibia, youth have been protesting demanding immediate political action on sexual gender-based violence.
In the Ivory Coast and Ghana, there has been an increase in child labor and child trafficking.
In South Africa, they are battling gender-based violence and rape. These are only a few of the countries, and each has its own battles they are facing. Read articles, sign petitions, and educate those around you. Now, to introduce our second guest, who will be talking more deeply about Nigeria, is our good friend Tosan. Tosan is a junior just like us. He's from Nigeria. He's qualified for the national junior swim team. Occasionally, he loves to read and play cornhole, and for fun, he loves to play FIFA and GTA. He's currently learning how to surf right now, and please give a big welcome to Tosan.
Welcome, Tosan.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me.
We love
I
to
just
have
wanted
you.
to say, I think it's so good how you guys are like looking deeper into the problems that are happening in Africa, because that tends to be neglected, and it's cool that like people like me that are not even from there are going deeper into this situation. So yeah, let's get to it.
Thank you. So, our first question is, what is your personal connection with Nigeria?
So both my parents are from Nigeria. My mom is from the south of Nigeria, from Warri State, and my dad is from central Nigeria, Kogi State. And I was born here, but I moved to Nigeria when I was 4 and lived there for about 7 years before coming back to the States. So yeah, that's my personal connection to Nigeria.
So, to start off, we want to talk about SARS, or otherwise pronounced SARS. Can you tell us the history of SARS and how it began?
Oh, sure. So SARS stands for the Special Anti-Robbery Squad. It started off in like the late 90s when there was robbery and kidnapping on the streets were at an all-time high. So that was like basically made to combat robbery and generally crime on the streets. But instead, like as time progressed, we see that they did the exact opposite of that. Like they unlawfully rape people on the streets. Unlawful violence will take place on the street, and particularly they'll extort the youth. Like, let's say I have an iPhone, right? And I'm dressed well. And that will be their main target, because they believe any young person that's not doing a 9 to 5 job, wearing a suit and tie, and working in an office is a quote unquote criminal. So that will be their main target. So after this going on for so long, the NSARS movement like rose out to combat police brutality and basically stereotyping of the youth. But I think it was last Wednesday, a protest was taking place near the toll gate and for the NSARS movement, and they're peacefully protesting the street. And the president, Muhammad Buhari, ordered the massacre of innocent protesters, like innocent protesters. And he told, funny enough, he told the channels TV, which is the local news in Nigeria, to go off live. And he switched off the power actually in the city, and he ordered the massacre of innocent lives of protesters. And I just find that heartbreaking.
Yeah, that's really sad how the government, the people who are supposed to protect you, are doing the opposite. Um, so
Mm.
you mentioned a little when we were talking about your experience with SARS when you were living in Nigeria, and we were wondering if you could expand on your experience and how some things on social media aren't portrayed and what that looks like for someone who's living in Nigeria right now.
Oh my God, so many things happen and occur that we just can't see. Like normally in Nigeria, we portray the court cases of these young men and young women. And a perfect example would be um, a musician called Naira Marley, who's really popping in Nigeria. You could compare him to the likes of, let's say, Playboy Cardi, or like a very fast and upcoming artist in Nigeria who who speaks out a lot against police brutality and injustice in Nigeria, who was now arrested and put in jail for about 2 months for being falsely accused of being a criminal. And what they had on him basically was that he had a laptop. He had a laptop, he was young, he was rich, and he dressed well. That's all it takes in Nigeria. All it takes for them to describe you as a quote unquote criminal. So basically, we see all the court cases and them being falsely convicted, but we don't see the actual evidence. And we don't know how these young people are making their money and are just accused, and they're just being accused and thrown in prison for being young and successful without the full story being portrayed. And thank God I have not had any personal one-on-one encounters with SARS, but back home, where my mom and dad live right now, where I live and probably will go back to Nigeria, they could hear the protests from my house. Actually, they could hear them singing the national anthem, saying various chants. And actually, they've burnt multiple toll gates, and they could see the fumes rising up into the air from the burns and remains of the toll gates. So yeah, there's so many things the media just doesn't portray because the government controls the media in Nigeria. And I feel that just prevents people from getting the full gist and understanding of the story of what's happening in Nigeria, as well as so many countries in Africa, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, in your opinion, do you think that any progress is being made right now in Nigeria?
Yes, yes. So like basically we have a term in Nigeria called Sorosoke, and that means those who speak out. And that term was coined because unlike the generation that came before us, we've learned to speak out against social injustices and injustices within the government. So I think the biggest progression we've made, especially within the this generation, is that we've learned to at least speak out against injustice. So I think it's a small step, was a small step in the big direction to end SARS. And not only to end SARS, but to end government corruption in Nigeria, because SARS is only a small portion of the big problem, which is government corruption in Nigeria and throughout Africa.
Listening to you talk, I think it's interesting how people who are portrayed as successful
Hmm.
are criminalized or targeted as criminals. I don't know. I find that really strange how, like, I mean, we live in a world where you can make money off of different things. I mean, some things are legal and some things are illegal, but to target specific people walking just because they look successful and then target them as criminals, I don't know. I find that very interesting.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it has to do a lot with how you look, how you appear. Like right now, if I have dreads, like that's considered I'd be considered someone like a thief, like someone you'd hear. They call it 419s actually, like someone who call you from Nigeria and say, "Yo, I'm an African prince." You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'm an African prince. I'm in debt right now, but when I retake my throne, like I'll pay you back. Like that's yeah, that's what that's what they feel, having dreads, having the latest iPhone and being young, not wearing a suit, dressing flashy, wearing a chain. Things like that could make fits into their perfect description of what you call a 419, a thief. So I think it has to do a lot with the older generation's way of thinking
Yeah.
versus our way of thinking. For us, it's not about how you dress, but about your character on the inside, which matters. I could have the craziest afro, the craziest dreads. I could wear the biggest, baggiest chains, and I could still have better values and be of better use to my country than someone who fits the physical description you'd prefer, but it's extorting the youth, robbing the country of their natural rights. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's. I definitely agree with that. Like, I definitely, like, especially right now, you can definitely see the difference between the older generation and the new generation, and how a lot of the older generation sees materialistic things as someone who contributes negatively, but us, we've kind of seen everyone and we've seen every different person, and we've kind of understood that, materials and things like that don't really define a person. So that's really interesting. So with everything going on right now, obviously, because our series is the Black Lives Matter movement, why is this so important for us to talk about what's going on in Africa, especially at a time where the Black Lives Matter movement is still going and is still being talked about?
I'd say the Black Lives Matter movement doesn't just end in the US. Like Black Lives Matter is Black Lives Matter globally. You can't say Black Lives Matter and only support Black Lives Matter in the US and turn your backs on the brothers in Africa. You can say Black Lives Matter in Africa and like turn your backs on those in the LGBT community. All Black Lives Matter means all Black Lives Matter, regardless of where you place on the spectrum. You know what I'm saying? So to anyone who supports Black Lives Matter in America or Nigeria, it's just as equal to Black Lives Matter anywhere else. And I feel if we all come together and support the same cause, we could all help Black Lives Matter globally rather than help it in our small areas because we're stronger together.
Yes, I agree with you so much. So I want to ask you, what advice do you have for those who are looking to be more aware and want to help? Because at the end of the day, we're here in America, and so I want to know like what I can do to further help the cause in Nigeria right now.
I'd say three major things you could do to help. You've got to get informed on the situation. There are various international, as I said, Black Lives Matter is beyond the US. So you could always watch the international news networks, CNN, BBC. They're talking about it all over the place. That could get you very informed on the NSARS matter, the Black Lives Matter, and generally global international breaking news. I could also say like you could reach out to me. There are a couple Nigerians and Africans on campus that I know are well informed of these situations. You could talk to me. I'm always open to have these discussions, me as well as my sister, a freshman. Her name is Temi. You could go up to her, have a nice convo with her. I think there's Tofumi too, Nigerian. I bet she's well informed on the situation. So you could always ask. It doesn't hurt to ask. And last but not least, you need to spread awareness. Tell your friends, educate other people once you have that knowledge of what's going on, and spread it on social media. Like let it be known. That would really help the cause because social media is very powerful nowadays. So spreading it on media could get it to so many people and educate so many people that you would have never guessed it could get to. So social media is a great network. Use it to spread awareness.
Thank you so much for being here, Tosan. Do you have any last words of wisdom you want to give, or where people can find you on social media if they do want to have further conversations with you, or do you just want to shout out?
Oh yo yo. The ad on IG's underscore TSNOBATS, no spaces, no caps, underscore. And one last word on of wisdom is that, look, if Black lives don't matter in the motherland, like how's it gonna matter outside the motherland? You know what I'm saying? If we can make it relevant in our own backyard, how are we gonna portray that to the whole world? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Just
Definitely.
try. My advice is just take this as seriously as you took any other Black Lives Matter movement. We're one. Let's fight together. You know.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
Those
so
words are so
much.
powerful. Thank you, Sosan, for being here. We're honored to have you as our second guest.
No problem.
Big moves. Yes.
Big moves.
We love being
Big moves.
educated on this podcast.
Yes.
No problem. No problem. Anytime. Anytime.
Thank you.
Thanks
Glad
for
to be-
coming.
No problem. All right.
Thank you so much again, Tosan and Z, for being our very first special guest. Before we end, I just want to reiterate what both Tosan and Z said several times. We need to have these conversations. We need to be uncomfortable. We need to keep doing our research. And if you guys remember from our first episode, this is why me and Carla are doing this, so people can be aware of what is going on, so people can be aware and spread awareness to friends, to family, do extra research. This is just one episode dedicated to such a big topic, and you need to do more than listen to this episode. You need to go out and do your research, and I just want to reiterate that because that was mentioned several times today, and I think it's so important.
Yeah, like Tali said, the whole point of this is for us to use our platform whatever way we know how. Even if we only have 100 followers on Instagram, we're getting to at least 100 people. And so that's what's important to us, to spread that knowledge, to spread that information, and to spark something in people to that they want to be educated. And so I just want to make this one last point in something that Tosan mentioned, that all Black Lives Matter. This isn't exclusive to all the Black lives in America or all of the straight people. This includes those Black lives who are living outside of the country, or those Black lives who are in the LGBTQIA plus community. This is all Black lives. And Tosan said it so perfectly, that we all need to come together. And that is how we're going to get change. And that's how we're going to spread awareness and make this world a better place.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Tali.
I'm Carla.
And that's on Pop in the Bubble.